Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar being hosted by the Institute of Sustainability Studies. My name is Nazia Hussain, and I'm thrilled to have all of you here for this very exciting and informative session. We are very fortunate to be joined by a special guest, Nick Inge, the Chief Operating Officer of Fingreen AI. Nick and his team at Fingreen are at the forefront of transforming financial decision making through the power of AI. And under his leadership, they have developed innovative AI driven solutions that have really helped businesses achieve sustainable financial growth. Today's webinar will be focusing on Fingreen AI's Double Materiality Tool, and we'll be diving into how this cutting-edge technology can really help identify and prioritize sustainability issues within your companies. And by the end of this session, you will really understand the concept of DMA better through a technological lens. And of course, why is it crucial for accurate and impactful sustainability assessments? Throughout the session, if you have any questions at all, feel free to drop them in the LinkedIn comments section, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A towards the end where Nick will answer as many as possible. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand things over to Nick. Nick, thank you so much for being here with us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Nazia. Yeah, appreciate the introduction and very happy to be here to talk a little bit more about Fingreen AI and what we're worked on with our double materiality assessment tool. So maybe I'll start with a little bit of context in relation to who we are, and then we can jump into the platform and go through a bit of a demo. So yeah, we're a French startup. We're almost 3 years old now. And our whole mission is how can we make sustainability assessments more efficient, more automated with the use of our software and the use of AI. So we're essentially helping over 100 companies now conducting their CSRD all around Europe and the UK. And our kind of value proposition is creating a project management software with different reporting bricks. So one of our bricks is the CSRD with the double materiality assessment as a part of that. But we also have different bricks or products in relation to GHG, EU taxonomy, VSME specialized module as well. So our platform is being used by not only corporates, but also sustainability consultants and intermediaries who are looking for solutions to kind of help streamline what can be, I guess, quite a complicated process, a manual process that involves a lot of data collection, a lot of manual assessments. So what Fingreen AI is a way to kind of bring that all together. So we very much position ourselves as a technological solution, not as consultants, nor DMA implementers. So today's webinar, I'll be looking at this more from a technological perspective and our kind of interpretation of the double materiality assessment tool. But worth noting is that everything you see today has been co-developed not only from us from a software perspective, but from our consulting partner network. So essentially how this tool kind of was born, or at least this module that you will see, was a couple of years ago now, us building an MVP or a minimum viable product of the double materiality assessment tool, then hosting dozens and dozens of workshops with early adopters and CSRD professionals, where essentially now it has developed to where it is today. The DMA tool, it's quite flexible in approach, and again, it's designed for different ways of working, but and different interpretations of, I guess, EFRAG's writing of what a double materiality assessment is. So I might jump into the tool now. And as we spoke earlier, like, please, I know you'll be kind of interjecting with questions along the way, but we're also going to be getting questions from the audience as we go. So please, if anything's unclear, please stop me and we can kind of go deeper into it. But I know we only have kind of 40 minutes, so I'll go relatively high level and see how we go for time.
That's good.
Okay, so, and you can see my screen, can't you?
Yes, clearly.
Perfect, great. Let me just maximize this. So I'll jump directly into our CSRD dashboard, and you'll see CSRD, but this module we're looking at will just be the double materiality assessment. But essentially, you know, if we had a longer demo, I would look to give you kind of wider access or looking at different modules within the tool as well.
Nick, I'm so sorry to do this, but we can't see your screen.
Oh,
Do you want to just share it again?
sorry. Has it dropped off, has it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to share. It's not saying I don't have permission to share. Sorry about that. Let me try again. Yeah.
No problem. Take your time.
Okay, let me try something else. How about now? Is that working now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
All good.
Okay, so what you can see here on the left is the flow of our DMA tool. We start with the company setup where, and I'll take you through this. Then we jump into the DMA, which is really systematically taking you through the identification of stakeholders, value chain items, and then building out your materiality assessment. And we'll go into what that looks like. So how we have built this is with an AI approach. So through the company setup, we essentially take the basic information of the organization that you're doing the assessment on, where you input, you know, locations. We then take your activity sector and NAICS code. And what this is doing is building the first bricks of our AI, doing essentially building a profile of the organization. So the first step is we're taking publicly available information from the web that we believe or that the AI believes could be relevant to your DMA assessment. The second part of our setup, so you can see here that the AI has found various different blogs and forums and articles around this organization that the user can kind of add their own URLs as well or delete and change them. So that's the publicly available sources. The next part of the setup, and the setup really takes 5 minutes or less, is private documents. So the private document part of the setup is happens in our data lake. And what the data lake is, it's a place for you as the ESG implementer or the person conducting the DMA to essentially dump documents that you have of the organization that you've already worked on. So these may be impact reports, these may be board papers, these may be sustainability reports or other documents that you have, which again, you're feeding into the AI to help it better understand your organization to help streamline your DMA assessment. So you can see here that there's a bunch of documents that have been added into the private setup. And already below, you can see that the AI is finding suggestions for stakeholders, value chain items, and impacts, risk, and opportunities. While I'm on the data lake, I won't go too deep into it because that's almost like another discussion. But here is where you can start to conduct your gap analysis, which is relevant when you're going all the way to doing an ESRS data collection, which is, again, another conversation, but also in your pre-DMA work. So when the documents are uploaded into the data lake, not only are the AI suggestions coming in terms of potential recommendations of stakeholders, value chain items, and impacts, risks, and opportunities, but the AI is also tagging and finding parts of the DMA which it believes could be relevant to those documents. So when you are looking at your gap analysis, potentially pre-DMA due diligence, you can dump all of your documents here and then kind of have an overview of, okay, we have a lot of document and evidence coverage over climate change risks, but we don't have any kind of evidence or documentation in relation to another risk like circular economy. So it kind of helps you paint a picture in terms of like where your documents and evidence are sitting in terms of your coverage around a DMA. And that also feeds into the ESRS when you're conducting the ESRS data collection. It helps you understand what documents you do and do not have. But now I'll jump into the DMA itself. So now we're assuming that we've done a setup, and you can see the flow of our DMA here on the left. So the first kind of two pillars or bricks of the DMA to kind of get that set up is the identification of stakeholders. So the tool here has two ways for you to do this. So here you can see a list of stakeholders that we've already built out as a part of our DMA assessment. You can add stakeholders by way of just adding a stakeholder manually, inputting information and notes around the stakeholder. But here you can look at our AI suggestions. And here again is where the AI has taken the information from the setup and then is giving you a list of stakeholders that it believes could be relevant to your DMA assessment. So, this is quite a long, extensive list of stakeholders kind of across the value chain of the business. And as the implementer or the user of the tool, you can either accept or reject these suggestions from the AI. And if you accept them, you can go in and edit them and add further information. One thing to note, and I'll just show you here, is that all of our AI suggestions come with source-backed information. So here you can see the AI suggestion has come up with these stakeholders, but it's also showing you which documents or which piece of source information the suggestions have come from. So really trying to avoid the black box or the idea of AI hallucinating to give confidence to the user that they are actually relevant suggestions. So I might just go back to, and I know, Nazia, you had a question for me earlier in relation, and maybe I'm preempting one of your questions, but in relation to when you're building out the stakeholder list, or what process should someone go through to decide which stakeholders are relevant or not, and kind of what is the thinking behind that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and talking to our consulting partners around this, there are different approaches, of course, but a lot of people building out a DMA or the initial starts of DMA will kind of go through key stakeholders and kind of the stakeholders that are evident across the value chain of the business. And there might be between 10 to 20, depending on kind of the organization as a starting point. They'll then do the same for value chain items. Again, they're the big value chain items or the stakeholders that are very evident. So maybe if you have a consumer goods company, it's like the customers, obviously, or transportation and logistics. They then start building out the IROs methodically. And when they're going through the IROs, is when they'll start to identify other stakeholders that actually must be quite relevant or should be quite relevant to a specific impact, risk, or opportunity. And then they'll kind of jump back into the stakeholders and continue to build out subgroups or more specific stakeholders. So a lot of people kind of seem to build the general structure around a DMA, kind of high-level stakeholders, value chain items, IROs. And then as they start to build out and do the actual impact assessment, many other stakeholders will be kind of uncovered in those discussions with the team they're working with on this.
I do have a question, Nick. I'm sorry
Sure.
there, but is there a way that the tool can sort of give a weightage to the stakeholders? You know how I mean that for certain companies, a certain stakeholder group may have a much more profound impact on the company's decisions than another set, right? Does the tool sort of identify that for the company, or is that like a manual sort of piece of data or information you need to feed into it?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So what the tool does do, and I'll show you when we get to the materiality section, is that it does give the user suggestions on which stakeholders would be relevant to specific impacts. And that's important because you could have a theoretical impact. It might be, around pollution or drought. But then the tool will kind of look through the stakeholder groups that are relevant, and they will say, this impact is likely affecting these stakeholder groups. And it will do that for all of the impacts. So therefore, you're kind of building out a list of the stakeholders who are kind of more highly affected than others. But where I think this is kind of an important element of our tool. Like we're not trying to position the tool as automating a DMA without human intervention. And it is the nuanced relationships that a company will have with stakeholders that only really the directors or the managers will know to really determine like what weighting to put on the stakeholders based on their interaction with them. And also an important part is the stakeholder engagement piece. You may have stakeholders that heavily affected by an IRO, but they're quite hard to engage with for whatever reasons. And if you can't kind of engage them to get their input on the materiality with evidence, it's quite hard to feed that into the DMA. So the tool will kind of help you get to that point of identifying, recognizing, but it really is on the implementing team to go through the process of discussing, engaging stakeholders, conducting interviews, discussions to work out, okay, is this relevant or not, and to what degree. Then I'll move on from stakeholders after this. So just quickly to show you, within each stakeholder list, or within the list, you click on the stakeholder, it opens a kind of digital workplace for you to do the assessment on the stakeholder. So here you can add, sub-user groups. So for example, board of directors, you may actually add a list of the directors. You can start to link value chain items. And here is kind of the project management side of the tool with the data tab. So here you can add data, but you can also request information. So here you could do a data request, add external stakeholders with a survey or questions, or ask them for more information. They receive an automated login from the platform, fulfill the question or the data request, and it's stored directly on the tool. So the idea is that it's giving you, whichever part of the DMA, the tool is just giving you a space to attach documents, request documents. There's this auditability tab. So it's kind of tracking everywhere on the tool. It's kind of digital paper trail as you wish to kind of see who's actually been on the tool and added what and at what time. And so is this kind of overarching project management capability within the tool. I'll then jump into value chain items and then move into the materiality mapping piece. So value chain items, again, they're built out in a similar way. You can use the AI suggestions to look at value chain items or see the suggestions that may be relevant to the organization. Again, these are coming from the publicly available information and the private documents that have been added, as well as the NACE codes. So, there's a long list of potential value chain items, which, again, this may not be the secret sauce to giving you the complete output of your DMA value chain items, but in the early stages of your assessment, this is extremely useful because there's a lot of research that needs to go in, a lot of workshops, a lot of kind of whiteboard discussions between teams to actually map out a DMA. What are the value chain items? Who are the stakeholders? What are the IROs? The AI here will kind of give you a big head start on that. So you can kind of see, okay, this is a long list of value chain items. We can consider, we can discuss, debate. If we accept them, they're added into this list. And then, once they're added into this list, we can click on any of them, and then it opens up, okay, we're looking at the value chain item of distribution, whereby here are the stakeholders that are associated with this value chain item, where on the tool now you can kind of, the lists are updating live. So now you can add a relationship between value chain item and stakeholders. And also you can actually start to add IROs directly to the value chain items as well. Any questions, Nazia, on the value chain side of things?
I think one thing that I do want to understand is that how does this tool sort of stay updated with like latest regulations? I know we're viewing this from the lens of the ESRS standards.
Sure.
Do you think that even with like the omnibus package coming in and with changes around what exactly companies will be reporting, even under DMA, how adaptable is the tool?
Yeah, really good question again. So the double materiality, well, first, maybe you're taking a step back. So what we do as a software organization is we're digitizing regulations. So we are digitizing new regulations, and we are keeping up to date with existing regulations. So for example, EFRAG, they published an update to the digital taxonomy last September. we kind of then went through the process of completely updating the CSRD module to be in line with the digital taxonomy. So again, we're waiting for the omnibus to kind of come through later this month. Whatever the direction is from that point, the CSRD module will be updated to be in line with the CSRD regulations. There's talk of a double materiality becoming a single materiality, so just looking at the financial side of that ledger rather than the impact, which would be a great shame, might I add, but it's potential. But either way, our DMA tool will remain as a DMA because, apart from the CSRD, there are a lot of use cases for this, which we're seeing not only from consulting partners, but from insurance companies, financial institutions, private companies who see this far more than a regulatory ticker box. Because as we all know, like a DMA is actually looking at impacts, risk, and opportunities for an organization. And thus it can be very insightful, not only for the organizations, but for those who are potentially insuring them or lending them money or investing in them. So we see the DMA tool being kind of extremely robust and valuable beyond the CSRD regulation. If the CSRD goes away from the DMA, the DMA will stay here and it will kind of continue to evolve based on kind of the use case. But yeah, we essentially have a regulatory alert. So when there are changes to the regulations, we kind of adapting the software to be as up to date as possible. But I'm very interested to see kind of what the next month holds for specifically the CSRD. But we see ourselves a little bit agnostic to the regulations. This is one of our bricks. But we see a lot of impact-focused organizations, impact consultancies who will be pushing on with double materiality assessments in an agnostic way to any regulatory changes.
Brilliant. That's really good to know.
Okay, so value chain, yeah. So you're building out your stakeholder list, building out your value chain list, and you can kind of essentially jump back and forth, and this is used in quite a dynamic way. But here is kind of where the bulk of the assessment sits, and that's in the materiality mapping of the organization. So when we're looking at materiality or thinking about materiality, we have two views of this in the tool. The first view is what you can see here, and this is really it's a dynamic list for the user to kind of see a list of all of the impact topics from eFrag subtopics and sub-subtopics. So there's kind of 80 plus of these. And I might just unexpand these because it gets quite long. But you can see here are the key impact topics that the organization needs to do an assessment on. And when we talk about doing an assessment, you're either adding impacts, positive or negative, you're adding risks, financial risks or financial opportunities, or you're opting out and you're essentially creating your rationalization as to why there are neither risk, positive or negative impacts, risk or opportunities. So here is a space or a dashboard that gives the user an opportunity to document this in a methodical way. So here you can add an impact, and essentially that gives you an opportunity to add a key description of that impact, same as risk and opportunity, and same as opting out. And what that leads to is that once we've added an IRO, it again creates this space for you to do your assessment on that impact, risk, opportunity. So here we have a description of it, and everything you see here on this demo account has been written by the AI. So we kind of did a basic setup, and the AI kind of populated this with AI suggestions. So here you can see a financial risk, a description of it in relation to raw material sourcing, an opportunity to conduct scoring, collect data, assign tasks, and kind of audit this as well. I'll come back to this, but I'll just quickly show you the other view of the IROs, and that is kind of starting with the AI suggestions. And this is where it can be super valuable to kind of get a 360 look at, potential impact areas of the organization. So again, the AI not only gives suggestions on stakeholders and value chain items, but also on impacts, risk, and opportunities in quite a granular way. So it will propose an impact. It will kind of propose what impact matter it is relating to. It will suggest value chain items as well that are related to it, and a kind of description of what that is. These again are associated with source referential. So you can see that it's referring to text from page 91 of the sustainability report. And you as a kind of sustainability lead or the person in charge of the DMA at the organization, you may be a consultant or you may be head of ESG, or maybe you might be a small business and you're just someone's throwing you the task of doing a DMA. This gives you, again, a nice platform to start getting some ideas from the AI, which is taking into context the CSRD regulations and your company around potential impacts, risk, and opportunities. With the AI, what users can do, and it's a text box here, you can talk to the AI to get more and more specific suggestions. So here you can see there's 16 suggestions around IROs, so impacts categorized under impacts, risk, and opportunities. But the user may want to see only suggestions in relation to circular economy opportunities, as an example. Or they may want to see a longer list, a shorter list, only in relation to one specific stakeholder. So the users, kind of in an unlimited way, can sit here and talk to the AI, relaunch the AI assistant, and it usually takes, between 30 seconds to a couple of minutes. It will kind of think, and then it will give you a more refined risk list of IRO suggestions based on your feedback. So again, like when you're thinking about starting your kind of can be daunting task of starting a DMA, this can really help because when you're kind of trying to map out what are the potential IROs to the organization across the spectrum of impact topics, you can use this to kind of prompt creativity and ideas. And we're seeing that it is, people are going through the suggestions and they're saying, no, that's not relevant, reject, that's not relevant. But then that is really relevant. We hadn't thought of that. We hadn't thought of that. We hadn't thought of that. Let's definitely include those IROs in the matrix, and then kind of take it to the next step of, okay, let's engage the stakeholders to better understand the materiality of this. Is it a hypothetical? Is it something that actually is an opportunity to the organization or not? So the AI is helping, again, build the kind of the bricks to quickly get an assess or an understanding of the potential IROs to the organization. I might jump back into an example of one impact, just so we can look at it again in terms of the assessment that is being done with this. And again, this tool is designed to be quite flexible. And when I say that, as we know, eFrag have been quite vague in their direction on how to conduct scoring. We have scale, scope, and if it's a negative impact, irremediability in terms of the different ways to make an assessment on an IRO. But different consultant users have different interpretations on how to set thresholds. Should we be multiplying or adding the total scores? What does 1 out of 10 actually mean? What does 10 out of 10 actually mean? And I'm not here to tell you how to conduct scoring concretely, because I've heard 50 different interpretations of how to do that. So what we've done, again, taking a software lens rather than a consulting lens to scoring, is building a flexible tool for the user to then apply their methodology to it, how they want to conduct the scoring. So the user can determine scoring ranges. They can determine the mathematics behind the scoring, the thresholds. So is material 5? Is material 1? Is material 9? And what does 0 mean to you? What does 9 mean to you? We initially hard coded all of this based on some feedback from consultants and our interpretation of EFRAG's scoring guidelines, but very quickly found out that at least today there is no one way to conduct scoring. But the most important thing that we're learning is yes, the methodology, but more is the rationalization and the justification you have when conducting your scoring. Because when you have an auditor coming through this in a year's time, or if you have your board of directors interrogating, hopefully the board of directors is actually involved in the scoring, but if you're getting interrogated on this, it's all about how have you rationalized your scoring methodology? Where, do you have sufficient evidence? Have you engaged the stakeholders? And so again, from the software perspective, we're giving a space for you to set up the scoring, how you want it to be configured, and then a digital space to collect the data, to request information from relevant stakeholders. And this can be dumped in the data lake. You may just have voice notes, you may have recorded interviews, you may have surveys. These can all be fed into the data lake and sit kind of as supporting evidence behind the IRO. And a lot of our users, particularly those working with kind of complex organizations, when they're doing a DMA, they've got hundreds and hundreds of IROs that they're assessing at one time. And that's really, in some ways, it's hundreds of projects because each IRO has different stakeholders, different information, different evidence. So this screen here is just giving our users a clear way to navigate all of those IROs. You can sort these by materiality or by matter or by name, or you may be like, okay, yeah, today we're looking at energy. Okay, here are the two energy IROs that we've added to the impact matrix. You click on whichever one you're looking at, you open it, and then again, you automatically have all of your data saved here. You may have tasks with users. You have your kind of scoring methodology in kind of one tranquil space. Because the project management, there's the assessment side, the impact assessment side, which is a huge piece of work, but more so there's just an efficiency bottleneck with trying to project manage these DMAs, particularly when there are a lot of stakeholders and a lot of impacts, risks, and opportunities that you need to do the assessment on. I realize I'm doing a lot of talking and we don't have too much time, so I'll just kind of show you some visualizations in terms of output. So we have different visualizations, materiality graph, which just kind of shows you the impact topics and then kind of subtopics too, based on a kind of XY graph of matter, impact, and financial materiality. And the size of the circle determines how many IROs are involved with that impact topic. And this can kind of be zoomed in as well and downloaded to multi-format. And we as a software, and then maybe just to kind of close out the flow, the material topics in the DMA then feed directly into our ESRS data collection module. And then there's a whole nother kind of, I guess, project management workflow to kind of collect the data in ESRS based on the material topics of the double materiality. But I might pause there, Nazia, because I realize we don't have a lot of time, but hopefully that's given you a sense of the flow of the DMA.
Oh, it absolutely has. And I have a lot of questions from participants and otherwise that I don't want to ask. So maybe if we just get into it.
Sure.
Okay, I just have one question around going back to the data step in the process. How does the tool sort of navigate conflicting data or just uncertainties when it's trying to identify material issues across sort of different business units or regions? How is the AI sort of trained to do that?
Yeah, so The, you know, of course, if there's different information coming in from different sources, the AI will, the AI will not be able to tell you which information is correct or not. But the things that will happen is that the AI will give suggestions in relation to the specific stakeholders. So it will kind of, and because it's source backed suggestions, it will kind of show you, okay, this stakeholder is, or this yeah, this stakeholder has submitted this information. It is related to this IRO, and it will show that it is from that stakeholder, and this stakeholder has submitted this. And again, a DMA isn't about having binary information necessarily. It's about if stakeholders have conflicting information, the most important thing is just to document that the stakeholders actually have a very different view on this, and one stakeholder may score the materiality quite low because it actually isn't a big deal to them, the fact that something's happening in the supply chain. But one stakeholder may score this very high. So I think when it's in terms of like interpretation or the stakeholder's view, then I think conflicting information isn't an issue. I guess it's more if there's um, data coming in which is meant to line up or balance and it isn't, then that's another question. But in the DMA, it's not a data-based approach. It's a quantitative-based approach, so qualitative-based approach, pardon. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question.
No, it does absolutely. And I do have follow-up questions here, which is just around, how the EFRAG is currently working on an implementation guidance. And a participant is just asking if this tool is already updated to reflect that, or is that something that will be done in 2025?
Yeah, so the tool today is updated on the latest digital taxonomy published from EFRAG. Concretely. Um, from there, like we're waiting to see what happens after the omnibus announcement to make the next kind of technological upgrades or pushes to the regulation. But the most important thing is the data fields, the data collection that needs to be fulfilled in order to be compliant. That's completely up to date with the latest EFRAG regulations.
Brilliant. There's another participant just asking if you have examples of sector materiality graphs. In their case, it's around hospitality and hotels. And that's really just to understand the number of IROs that this industry might have.
Yeah, so at this stage, we're industry agnostic. So the visualizations that you saw or have seen are based on the inputs to the tool. So um, we we haven't gone down the path yet of kind of providing benchmark data on industry yet, but it's something that we're looking at. Particularly, the challenge with that question, or I guess with providing that, is that it's still very early in terms of groups who have published their DMA. You have obviously some very, very large organizations who have, but for the large majority of organizations conducting DMAs, there isn't a lot of data. There are examples of DMAs from specific industries, which we have on file, and we're working out what we can do with them. We're feeding that into our AI to kind of help better train responses and things like that. But in terms of a visualization on a specific industry, not today, but it's something that will come as there's more data here and more organizations are publishing their assessments and DMAs. We'll be able to kind of provide more benchmarking insights around that.
Brilliant. And would the tool itself sort of have a repository of these reports as per different industries? Do you think you would build a section for that?
Yeah, it's definitely something on our roadmap. How can we, but again, benchmarking on DMA is quite an abstract idea because it's, you're not just dealing purely with data. You're dealing with like a double materiality assessment of a company. But yeah, what we're looking towards is like as more data becomes available, kind of having some way to give insights to the users in relation to best practices in that industry. But we see that more as an AI approach rather than a research approach. So instead of kind of giving you a bunch of PDFs that you can kind of look through, it's like, how can we take publicly available information, feed that into the AI? Once we know your activity sector, then kind of giving you better suggestions as you're going through the tool, not only in relation to the information you've given us on your company, but also sector-wide information, and using existing DMAs is a part of that.
I have a follow-up question on that. How does the AI tool sort of remain unbiased in this process? And how does it make sure to reflect like real-world sustainability challenges?
That's a big question. And that's where it comes, like, we're doing a lot of work on building of our RAG system, which essentially is like the prompt engineering system that uses LLMs to give suggestions. Our current approach to that is by transparent AI. When I say transparent, it's giving you outputs that are linked specifically to evidence. And I kind of showed a few times the fact that we're using source, we're showing the source of information based on the AI suggestions. That's kind of our way today to say, okay, like, we've given you a suggestion that this IRO is relevant to you, but we're also showing you that we took this from this report, this website, this blog, and so it's kind of doing that research piece for you, because if you were doing this manually, you would have kind of come to that conclusion after reading all those reports and that blog and having those discussions. Then you would have come up maybe with that IRO yourself, but it's kind of doing the manual work for you. So then you have it in front of you, and then you, as the implementer, can say, okay, it's given me this suggestion. It's given me 5 source documents or pieces of evidence. Like, I'm confident that that's quite a relevant suggestion. But it might also give you a suggestion, and it's referring to, one document that maybe you don't believe has as much credibility as another document, but you've still uploaded it, and it's not referring to any other source documents. And therefore, again, this is like the human interaction. It's like, okay, I have 2. One is well backed by evidence. One has evidence, but it's maybe a long bow. Like, maybe we'll include it, but it will not be high in the materiality scale. So this is where, like, yeah, it's a very tough dynamic to navigate. But at this stage, we're trying to just use it as an efficiency tool, not use it as a way to give you an answer that it's just guessing. It's kind of it's empowering you with the information and a potential output, but then it's for you to kind of validate whether, you, with your understanding of the organization and talking to the directors and the mandate and the stakeholders, whether it is actually a relevant, addition to the DMA.
Brilliant. We're just over time, but I have 2 questions that I think are absolutely that I need to take them. So Peter here asks if there is a feature on the tool that allows for logging conversations. I imagine from an audit perspective, it becomes important while you're doing that. So is there a feature within, say, the tasks section on the tool or anywhere else?
Yeah, so we have a few ways to collaborate on the tool. The first is, yes, you can create tasks and to-do lists and things like that very easily. I guess probably the better way to do it, or the way to do it from an audit perspective, is to use the data request tab. So you can, and we call it data request, but it's actually a way for you to engage with a stakeholder through the tool. So you can create a data request, and that could be anything. It could be you asking a list of questions and then typing in the person's email address, a due date, submitting. They receive the email, they log in, and they provide an answer, and you can create a dialogue, and that's tracked. Or it could be you creating a data request with a Google Sheet, or an external link to a survey tool, because that's just easier for you, and say, please conduct this. Or here's a Word template, please send it back with your comments. So the tool can kind of track direct discussion, or it can be used as a proxy to essentially like avoid doing all of that via email, and then it's not tracked. So rather you can, ask or request documents information through the tool. They respond through the tool. It's tracked in the tool. And as well, and more importantly, like whatever's attached is automatically saved into the data lake.
Right. And I'm just going to take the last question here. And we have covered it in some capacity around just how the tool complies with evolving regulatory frameworks. But I think it's the bit of the question which is just asking around ethical guidelines, related to sustainability reporting, privacy, and corporate transparency. So any final comments on that aspect of the tool?
Yeah, sure. I mean, from a software perspective, we kind of have our security certificates, so ISO certified and SOC 2 as well. So we kind of, in that sense, like we're doing all we can in terms of data privacy best practice. In terms of the use of AI, that's a big question, and a lot of companies are grappling with whether they have policies to use LLMs and AIs. Some do, some don't. I know a lot of law firms are kind of resisting to kind of introduce AI into their workflow, and a lot of businesses are very liberal with the use of AI. So that's more of a question for the businesses, but from, I guess, a security standpoint, from us, like we're kind of going through GDPR, ISO, SOC, etc., to be compliant with all of the regulations, and as well, importantly, like our users kind of own their data. So we're not in the business of selling data, selling benchmark data, or benchmarking our clients or anything like that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nick. It was highly informative, and I'm sure our participants have taken extreme value for today's session. So thank you so much for that. And with that, we'll wrap up. Final thoughts for those of you who want to dive deeper into CSRD and the DMA, of course, I would encourage you to visit the ISS website. We have an introductory course on CSRD, and that will really help deepen your knowledge around CSRD, how to conduct the DMA, and as well as how can you use a tool like the one developed by Fingreen, to get your DMA assessments right. So do check it out. And thank you once again, Nick. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, Nazia. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, also, if anyone would like to have a discussion with us, or have a deeper demo on the tool, more than happy to. So please reach out as well.
Brilliant. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much,
much.
everyone. Have a good
Goodbye.
rest of the day. Bye-bye.